Ambassador Sansal, your point of view on what's happened in the last 24 hours. India seemed confident despite the diverse views coming in. And also I just want to go back to the specific wording of this, which says that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. It doesn't mention Russia by name, clearly a deviation from the Bali Declaration as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and you'll permit me first to congratulate India, its diplomats, of course, the president, in pulling this off. There were reasons to have doubts whether we would get a declaration and we would get the kind of unity that we now see. And thus, I think it is really a success in the face of great difficulties. And you name one of them just now, which is the Ukrainian problem. But I mean, compared to Bali, this is progress. We have moved ahead, even though we don't mention, or you, the declarators, don't mention the actual war as such. But the whole wording condemns actually what Russia is doing. Short of throwing Russia out of the G20, which no one would like to do, of course, this is, I think, as much as was possible to get. It was not only Russia that opposed a more stricter language. It was also China and some other countries. So it was difficult. And again, it's a success to pull this off. I mean, also the other points that you've been talking about just now are also successes. Like if you look at the economic situation of so many countries in the world, 92 trillion debts accumulated by countries in the global south. If you look at climate change, I think there has been progress that was not expected to that degree beforehand. The world was more difficult to deal with since Bali, and to achieve this is, I repeat myself, a success.
Right, a carpe diem there by India, clearly. Ambassador, stay with us. Jessica, I just want to go back to the other point of how Americans have, more often than not, viewed India as a counter influence or counter to China in many ways. And one of those aspects coming out clearly today was, of course, the announcement of America's, India, UAE and Saudi Arabia's infrastructure or the rail link that's coming up as well, which will, of course, link the Middle East to Europe and beyond. This is clearly, can be in a way, clearly seen as something that can work as much or even better than the Belt and Road Initiative that has not worked for China. And there have been many issues of lending, and the countries that have joined the BRI have said, well, they're ridden with debt.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go quite so far as to say it's a competitor to the Belt and Road Initiative, because we don't yet have a dollar figure on this at all. I've asked the White House for that and haven't been able to get that yet. And we don't know how long it's going to take to achieve. But what we do know is that it is an option. It is an alternative. And that is something that the White House has been very consistent about talking about, trying to offer the rest of the world when it comes to these big infrastructure projects, that they have been told directly by their interlocutors, particularly in South Asia and Southeast Asia, that they want other choices. So that goes to the reforms that the White House is supporting at the World Bank and the IMF, and it also goes to this infrastructure project. The other main objective that's achieved through this infrastructure project, and we can get into some of the details that I've got from the White House in a bit, is that it further connects the Middle East with each other, and it leads potentially, or lays the groundwork potentially, for a normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and that's of great import to the Americans. There are some domestic politics that can be influenced through that decision, but moreover, it's much more difficult to have a war and conflict in a location where there is incredible interdependence of the economies, and that's what this is likely to achieve. That's the goal here.
Right. Jessica, an important point there. Ambassador Sansal, would you like to respond to that? The fact that in the recent past, there have been attempts by America to normalize the relation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And if you have the whole play of, economics in the middle with this, infrastructure line going all the way to the Middle East or to Europe, then the chances of that negotiation become clearer. as well. And this, of course, can also be seen as China, which had sort of negotiated deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I know that we don't need to put a China factor into everything, but more and more we're seeing that America's decisions are also led in a way by that.
Yeah, China obviously has an impact on developments there. But basically, I'd say it's an intriguing, it's an even fascinating development that we observe there after the United States has made efforts to withdraw from the Middle East since several years already, actually since the Obama administration already. And now it's sort of getting back in. Obviously, it's not easier. But there are some successes like the Abrams Accords that have been concluded. And now you say it's not a competition to the BRI, but it's something, it's an alternative offer. Now, that is something that we Europeans have already made our sort of sobering experiences with, because the European Union has tried to develop offers that are attractive enough in comparison to what China in the beginning, in the initial stages of the BRI, seemed to offer. And only now, with the disillusionment with this becoming stronger in so many recipient countries, there might be an opportunity for both the European efforts and now for the American efforts as well to offer something to the countries who need it that they appreciate.
Right. Jessica, of course, we also see that America and India have seen commonality on other issues which were also brought in the joint communique or will be brought in the joint communique, like climate mitigation, sustainability goals, the regulation of cryptocurrencies, and all of these seem to be reflected in that draft resolution that has been accepted, of course, not by the US alone, but also countries like the UK and France, which have also been very vocal in some of the positions that they have taken.
Yeah, and Washington wanted infrastructure development to be supported by sustainable development. And so that's the objective with the deal that we just talked about in the Middle East. But it's also the case that they're looking to continue to pressure their own people, but also other major developed economies to make good on the promises they've made at previous COPs. And we're going, of course, in October to the next climate meeting. They want to lay the groundwork for the same level of ambition. They've definitely gotten a win in their eyes with the language around, I believe it's tripling your commitment to renewables. And there's some other wins because, of course, this was a highly difficult part of the negotiation. Just looking through my notes here, but I believe it was tripling the renewables by 2030 is the commitment that they secured in this communique. So that's a big win for India as well. Obviously, that's a huge goal of Prime Minister Modi to underscore the need for renewables and for sustainable development.
Right, and Ambassador Stansel, of course, as we've been pointing out, that America and the rest of the world understands India's position on Russia, which is far different from what the West projects about Russia. And this is clearly very deft handling by India of its relationship with Russia as well. The fact that Putin is not here, he's been represented by his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, and yet this decision has been arrived at.
Yes, as I said before, this is an achievement. It was hoped for that we could go beyond Bali. And I think in a way we did, even though Ukraine was not mentioned this time as it was in Bali. But the wide range of aspects that are talked about, that the declaration talks about, is clear enough. And this is a defeat for Russia, I think. In a way, it's also a defeat for China that has supported Russia here. And it is a relief, I think, because as you have pointed out, there were doubts about India's position in this difficult conflict, even though people understand the situation India's in. But as the chair of the G20, there was also the hope that India would handle this to bring about something like the success that in the end it did. So it is a satisfactory development.